All righty.
Check.
Can everybody hear me? All right. Well, great. Well, I want to welcome all of you to our event tonight. We're at the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle's Chinatown International District, and this is another installment in our United Way's Advancing Racial Equity series. And tonight we want to talk about trust-based philanthropy. And I'm really excited, and I will let you know that I am Gordon McHenry, and I'm really proud to be the President and CEO of United Way. Excited that you've all chosen to spend some time with us, explore concepts of participatory grant making, participatory practices that we're exploring, and I hope you either trying or will be inspired to try. I think for us, I want to make it really clear that at United Way, we're working hard toward a racially just community where people have homes, students graduate, and families are financially stable. We know that there is incredible amounts of intersectionality when it comes to poverty and racial-based inequities. I would also say that we are early in our journey toward being an organization that is fully competent and coherent in racial equity. We are aware of and have begun to explore models such as participatory grant making as ways for funders to better practice their racial equity. We tried that during COVID-19 and had, I think, success. We are continuing to do that, but also doing it with the recognition that the best way to do it is to learn from community and learn from folks who are closest to the issues, especially those who are called to serve and support our communities of color who suffer through the intersectionality of income, generational poverty, and oppressions that based on their identities. And so I want you to think that we are humble, curious, and looking forward to tonight's conversation. We're going to do a land acknowledgement, maybe a little hard to see with the lights, so I will also just take a moment to have us to reflect. We're in the Wing Luke Museum, which is located on the land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present. We invite you to take a moment to consider the land we are on at the moment and reflect on the history of the land, the culture that has been, the culture that is here, and the culture that we hope we can support in the future. We'd like to thank Wing Luke Museum for hosting this event. Wing Luke Museum, if you're not familiar with it, focuses on the rich culture, art, and history of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, and since 1967 has been a Pacific Northwest treasure. The museum is a Smithsonian Institution affiliate and the only Pan-Asian Pacific American community-based museum in the United States. We want to, so there are incredible stories in these walls and in this place. And so I hope you do get a chance to appreciate that tonight and in the future. I was visiting with a friend and I said, you know, when people come to town and visit, you know, family and friends, oh, it's Seattle summer, this is the place people need to come and experience. So I would encourage you to invite your family and friends, especially those who are visiting, to take time to learn about this museum and the stories that it contains. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Brighton Jones, Microsoft, and Amazon. And I'm going to turn this program over for a moment to our Chief Impact Officer, Regina Malveaux, who's, there she is. Regina, we'll bring you up.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting to see so many of our community partners here and to see so many of you that are really interested in this important work that we're doing. So as Gordon said, I am United Way's still relatively new Chief Impact Officer, which means I have the deep privilege of working with our community partners who are doing the work, our public, private, and philanthropic partners who are really helping to fund the work. And really what the work is working through a racial justice lens to prevent homelessness, break the cycles of poverty, and really look at how we neutralize inequities in the educational system. And kind of as part of those efforts, as Gordon has already said, I actually feel like I'm repeating Gordon's talking points, but as part of those efforts at advancing racial equity, we're really excited about the participatory grant making that we're currently implementing, as well as the additional work that we're looking to explore and experiment with. And so currently we fund in this participatory grant-making approach, 3 BIPOC coalitions, our Indigenous Coalition, the Black Community Building Collective, and the Racial Equity Coalition, and would really encourage you to visit our website, which you probably know is uwkc.org, and really learn more about each of those coalitions, as well as, the breadth of our work. I think one of the things that I was so excited about as I was coming to United Way is learning that we not only run 11 direct service programs of our own, but we fund about 150 organizations in the community that are doing this really just rich and important work. And so I think that's something to be really proud of. And actually, there are quite a few of our frontline staff who are doing that work. So if we could just give them all a big hand real quick. Thank you. And I agree. Woo! And let's see, and as Gordon said tonight, we're really inviting the audience to learn alongside us by hearing what our panelists have to share. Again, so grateful for all of the partners in the work, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Gordon.
Thank you so much, Regina. So we're going to learn from some friends and practitioners tonight. I'm going to introduce the panel to you, and then we'll get to hear from the panelists. To my immediate left is Dr. Aide Lavarega, co-founder at Collective Liberation in Practice. Next to her is Haley Ballinger, Community Health Program Manager of Kaiser Permanente, Washington. And last but not least in this introduction is my friend Russell Brooks, Executive Director of Red Eagle Soaring. And so each of our panelists will have a chance to provide some of their perspective. I've got a few questions for them, and then we hope that you will join us in a conversation. I'll make sure I covered my notes correctly, and yeah. I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Aide. Please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good to see you here this evening. And there's some friends here who I had not met in person until very recently, and who we got to work through the pandemic and got to see them here. So, and happy to see all of you who made it tonight. I'll talk a little bit about the work that I did in my previous role at United Way of King County, and also some of the work that I get the honor to do now. My name is Aide Lavariega, they them pronouns, and the work that I did when we were working at United Way of King County in the Department of Education was to redistribute funds in a way that would center communities of color. So the talk about today is about racial equity, and so what we did is center communities and figure out how to transform the relationships of power that historically have not included people of color, and making sure that those decisions were moved to organizations that are led by people of color, because those are the organizations that are closer, usually, right, to the issues, but most of the time furthest from power. So participatory grant making has the ability to shift and see that power to community organizations, and specifically in this way, participatory funding can be done without centering racial equity, but it's also a really good opportunity to have racial equity at the center of the work. So I'll tell you a couple of the stories of the work that we did, and one of them was the EACC, or Emergent Alliance of Communities of Color. And this was a group of 7 organizations. And what happened was that we had some funding, flexible funding, to move to the communities, specifically around early learning in this case. And these 7 organizations were small community BIPOC organizations. And usually how that happens in in a lot of the funding world is that we go into a room with a spreadsheet and we decide how that is going to be divided, right? We think like, maybe this organization may need 50,000 because we know here they say that they need this, and maybe this organization will take 30,000, and then at the end we're like, oh, we only can support 3 organizations in a meaningful way, and it gets really, really hard, really easy. And also, it gets really inequitable really easy, right? Because if you have a small organization with a lot of need, or if you have a large organization, how do you make those decisions? So what we decided to do is to use principles of participatory grant making, and also this process was heavily influenced by the book Decolonizing Wealth that we later, we talked about this book. We had a whole, launch and learn with this book as an organization. So if you haven't read it, it's a highly recommended book. It's called Decolonizing Wealth. And there's a website that goes with it. There's a workbook now to be able to use. And also, as in terms of resources, there's the participatory grant making, which is a global organization that is supporting folks who are doing participatory grant making. There's also a place where you can ask your questions. So there's a lot of folks around the world really looking to redistribute funds. So that was part of the EACC, this in the summer, fall of 2019. So we started building that work. And if you're in the funding world, I really encourage you to begin looking into how to redistribute funds in a different way, right? Because it is also about redistributing power. And it is based really on a reparations model of how we give back the power, and also we give back the funds to the communities that have worked really hard for this wealth to exist, especially in this country, right? So the way that we continue to do that work, lay the ground to then do other similar models of this work, with one of those being the Indigenous Fund. So the Indigenous Fund was also born out of COVID, and knowing the racial inequities that take place in the country and specifically in the county, and how to center Indigenous folks and be able to have direct, unrestricted, with very low reporting and multi-year support. And this is work that started to take place to directly support these organizations, and that we hope that continues to take place into the future, because it's really important work. I'm an Indigenous organization to the south, what is now the south of Mexico, and knowing that this support was going to local Indigenous organizations was so important, in urban Indigenous organizations, because that is how we continue to create solidarities and continue to have and build the movements that we need, especially in education and in the area that I was doing for the generations to come. So that is a little bit of the work within Emergent Alliance of Communities of Color. A lot of what we did was that the executive directors were making the decisions themselves. So they decided how that funding was going to be divided, and they decided, okay, this is how we're going to do it the first year. We're going to divide it almost in equal amounts, because we're going to together pool our resources to fund the position for one person to support the continuation of this work. So then after that, they created relationships, which is a really important part of this work, because it's funded in relationship and trust, right? So getting to hang out with other executive directors, for example, was very important. So that is part of how we have arrived to the Indigenous Fund work at United Way of King County. And then now in my role outside of United Way, I am an independent consultant. We have an organization called Collective Liberation in Practice, and get to do work also that outside supports Indigenous organizations, Black organizations, other folks of color, to continue to build this world that we want, right? This place of redistribution of power, redistribution of resources, as well as a place that is centers participatory practices and all of the things that we do. And I'm going to pass it to Haley. Yes.
All right, thanks. Testing, okay. Thanks, Aide. So hi, everyone. My name is Haley Ballinger. I use she, her pronouns. I am with Kaiser Permanente Washington on their community health team. I am a program manager that oversees our food and nutrition security work. And I, too, have gotten to just meet in person some friends I haven't met yet, except through a virtual screen. So it's great to be here. I am kind of here to talk about how Kaiser has done some trust-based philanthropy in the past year, and really some problems of practice of that, some vulnerability with that, and kind of some challenges to everyone in this room. And so the way that it works is we are one of the largest integrated health systems in the country. We're in several different regions. So I'm on the Washington team. We're up and down the I-5 corridor and then across in Spokane in the Washington area. And we are guided in community health by a community health needs assessment, which indicates kind of the greatest gaps in health disparities that there are. And so we redistribute some of our revenue each year to address those community needs. And we do that through grant making as well as through medical financial assistance and a number of other partnerships. But my team specifically does grant making. And so I want to talk about some movement we made around centering community voice, which I think is a really important first step. And we launched a pretty big request for proposals this past year. We actually launched two, one around mental health for young people and one around food security. And I'm here to talk about the food security one, but my colleague Jill would be happy to talk about the other one too. So the RFP became School Community Partnerships, a blueprint to equitable youth and family food security. And we dedicated approximately $2 million over 3 years to this initiative, but I'd like to kind of backtrack how we got to what it became and why community voice was the pinnacle of what it is now. So we were seeking to improve the inequitable health outcome in our state of food insecurity disproportionately impacting households of color with children. The data shows it. We know from everything Gordon said, the decades of systemic racism and compounding economic inequities, that that's the reality, and it's not about whether or not we have food, it's about all of those things. And so we also know that for households with children, school meal programs are an evidence-based solution, one with a lot of federal funding to get meals where needed, breakfast and lunch, right? Half of a child's daily nutrition intake. And this leads to learning capacity, educational opportunity, ultimately economic opportunity, and health opportunity. And we've been tracking that there are some concerning gaps in school meal program participation in our state and wanted to understand why. And so kind of pondering these gaps and working with brilliant thought partners like United Way and the food security team, shout out to all of you, I'm recognizing that in the anti-hunger spaces, it's predominantly white people, right, myself included, and it's predominantly systems leaders and adults. So how can we understand what these true barriers are if we're not talking to young people and their families and really learning from the pandemic as well as to how those needs are shifting. And so we kind of, I found that when I was asking systems leaders about some of the gaps and assuming it was just, things I don't know, that they're just, I don't know, we don't know what the gaps are. So we decided to kind of take that upon ourselves and host some focus groups. And we did kind of a holistic picture of the state system leaders. So we talked with WSDA, OSPI, some hunger advocates to really get that perspective. It's important. But then we also talked with the people who aren't always at the table. Even within school districts, sometimes child nutrition service leaders aren't there and the boots on the ground folks that are doing the work. So we talked with them. But then I think really importantly, we talked with community-based organizations led by people of color and those that are in the zip codes, in the neighborhoods, doing the distribution work, meeting the family's greatest needs. They have those trusting relationships. And then we also talked with high school youth, which was fun. Their vision for what they would do with $2 million is beautiful, but you can imagine. And so when you invite that much feedback, you're going to have to be prepared to be accountable to what community asks for, which I think is one of the challenges and one that we have to face. And I want to really share kind of the critical choice point that we had when we got some tough feedback. And our initial concept was really about funding school districts as kind of known community infrastructural hubs of food distribution and family resources. And they must just need funding, right, to get the resources out to community. Simple, they just need more funding. And so in the focus group with the community leaders of color, we got some pointed feedback that was really important to hear, and it was that these mainstream evidence-based hunger relief systems are the same ones that have historically traumatized our communities of color. There's broken trust, and it's not an obvious solution for communities of color. And so essentially a model placing power with school districts is perpetuating that trauma. And so that feels really jarring to hear with the best of intentions of trying to improve food security, but it's a privilege to feel that, and so I honor all of it. But there was kind of this choice point of Kaiser's investing in this very specific way with evidence-based hunger relief systems. I'm hearing that's not what's going to work, and so what do we do? And so we pivoted. I rewrote the whole RFP, which was a point of dedication, and kind of flipped the model on its head. And what the model became is the school community partnership idea of school districts and BIPOC-led organizations partnering together really with this idea of systems change and what does that look like, and bringing youth and family voice into that localized ecosystem of what you're building in your community. And so I think, we want $2 million to go to solutions that are actually going to work, actually going to get to the root causes, and we're hopeful that this will contribute to that. I actually have one of our awesome grantees in the room tonight, Marcia, with Family Works, and so you can ask her how well it's working for her community. But I also want to just note we changed some things in the grant structure as well, which I think as funders is really important to think about. What are those access barriers for those BIPOC-led community-based organizations? We were asked to fund each partner, so the school district and the community partner, individually, and really kind of enforce the equitable compensation of each partner, especially recognizing it's often the heavy lifting of the community organization that's not compensated. We also included a planning phase at the beginning of the grant term, and this was really about the time to form equitable partnership structures and a collaborative plan in partnership and harmony, and bring youth and family voice into what that is going to become and kind of build a pathway to do that throughout. And so the result is that we funded 4 amazing partnerships throughout King and Pierce County. In the future, we hope to expand beyond those counties. But the partners are completing their planning phase this week. So we're kind of tracking how it's going, and we hope to be able to share these learnings for replication in other communities. And I guess I would kind of close with, and I say this as a system leader, someone with the accountability of a system behind me and the accountability to my community, that we have to be willing to rumble with the discomfort of that jarring moment when we're told this isn't what's working. And so I encourage all of you to do that. It's the right work when that's happening. And the quote I'd love to leave you with in the spirit of community voice is one of the Black leaders who attended one of our information sessions said, "This is the first time I've seen myself and my people in a funding initiative, and thank you for seeing us." So I'll turn it to Russell, and thank you all.
Well, thank you both, and thank you, Gordon. So I want to welcome everybody here, and such great energy in the room. So many wonderful people gathered tonight, so thank you for being here. My name is Russell Brooks. I am Southern Cheyenne through my mother and English and Scottish descent through my father. And I'm the executive director for Red Eagle Soaring here in Seattle. And we're a native-led nonprofit that has served Seattle for over 32 years now with our Native, First Nations, Indigenous youth ages 10 to 19 to help them be able to express themselves with confidence and with clarity through both our traditional and our contemporary performing arts. Red Eagle Soaring, though, does much more than that in the context of what happens with our youth. We've served hundreds of Native youth over the years. We've had quite the trajectory to get to where we're at now and come through a lot of struggles and hard times to be at a place where we are realizing a new future, which I'll get to here shortly. But Red Eagle Soaring has persevered through a lot based on the impact of what it's done for our youth and our communities and also our families to give our youth a place to be able to retain their cultural identity in an urban setting. Also to be able to come together and develop like positive peer-to-peer relationships with other Native youth in the area. And so Red Eagle Soaring serves a variety of functions, really. We're also a part of the SUN, the Seattle Urban Native Nonprofits, so we're very linked into the other nonprofit agencies here in the area that serve the Native community in a variety of ways, and we collaborate together to support our community however we need to. Case in point, and I just want to say how vital the funding from United Way of King County through the Racial Equity Coalition, which is a 14-member organization that serves our BIPOC community to help with, like centering BIPOC organizations that serve the community being led by the community as well. The funding that we received over the pandemic for housing, like rental assistance and food assistance, was so vital to our families in the way that we work together as nonprofit agencies to be able to serve our families in a real time of need, to kind of even go outside of what we regularly do to be able to come together and support our families and meet their needs where they were at. Was really a powerful thing, and United Way and the Racial Equity Coalition gave us the ability to do that, and so really thankful for that. Also the Indigenous Communities Fund as well. It's helped us stabilize our organization through, over 3 decades of, finding our footing, here in the community. And being able to continue to provide an annual cycle of programming that we serve our youth. Because our youth are also scattered all over King County. We have youth that even come from as far away as Olympia, Tacoma. I had a mother who had 2 teenagers that drove down from Bellingham every week to bring her kids to Red Eagle Soaring in Seattle for about 2-3 years because of the impact that it served. And she was a single mom, working to, pay the bills and, put a roof over their heads. And, it was important enough for her to keep bringing her kids to Red Eagle Soaring because of what it was doing in their lives. So that's just kind of an example, I guess, of the dedication. Red Eagle Soaring becomes kind of a large extended family that people develop relationships within our organization that last their lifetime. And with that, our family continues to grow, and it certainly has through United Way of King County, the Racial Equity Coalition. We've developed some really strong bonds and relationships with just our community at whole, at large. With a variety of other organizations in our area. So we're really thankful to continue to grow our family and deepen those relationships with people, not just our Native community, but also all of our community here in Seattle and King County. Talking about the participatory grant making, when I was preparing to come here, I rely a lot on the things that I've learned from like elders in our community where I'm from in Montana with the Northern Cheyenne community, and there's an elder that he's been gone a number of years now, but I always remember him saying something to a group of us when we were younger through a mentoring network that we had started on the reservation called Junior Pathmakers to help our youth there. But he told us, he said, at one time, he said, we were a self-sufficient people. He said, we took care of ourselves, we took care of our own, and we didn't need anybody to take care of us. And along with that, he went on to talk about the fact that, we're still in a state of post-war recovery from what happened to our people. And many tribes, many of our Native people, especially Native people that end up in urban areas like Seattle or even like from our local neighboring tribes, have common threads of that particular history. I'll also say, too, another thing that he said was, when the Americans or the U.S. government came to make treaties with us, at first it was to establish friendships with us. But very quickly that turned to be something more sinister where they tried to control us. And then from that point, a lot of people, to whatever degree are aware of like the loss of land, the loss of resources, the loss of culture, even the loss of our children and our living legacies through the boarding schools. And how devastating that was to our tribal communities. So through that, we've been in this state of post-war recovery for generations now. So what that leads me to in talking about the participatory grant making and kind of the relationship that Native people and tribes have had with our country and specifically with the United States government and the powers that be. What United Way of King County and through like the Racial Equity Coalition and what we've been experiencing with the participatory grant making is really the beginnings of restoration and healing for our communities, and also a way that we move together as a whole in this country and in this city and in this county together with everyone. We have to we have to bring our communities together, and also we have to find our ways back into relationship with each other and get back in alignment with each other in relationship and also the ways of the earth. Because, and I've stated this before in like our Racial Equity Coalition meetings, but, like we all come from tribal people. You go far enough back, everybody comes from the sovereign nations of this planet. We're all indigenous to this planet. And the effects of colonization has affected everyone. So in order to decolonize and to get back to being who we are and who we say we are, we have to come into alignment and into the right relationship with each other. And the participatory grant making, nonprofits have been around for a long time, the nonprofit industrial complex and model. You look around, there's still disparities that need addressing. So has it worked? I don't know. We have to ask ourselves that question. And I think United Way of King County has done that and done that work and centered our BIPOC communities at the forefront to where, like, we know how best to serve our communities. We know the answers that will help kind of bridge those gaps. And so I like what you said earlier, kind of turning it on its head, but this participatory grant-making model is letting us lead that process, which historically has not happened. But in doing so, we are deepening our relationships and coming into allyship with each other to help support our communities in a really, really powerful way that is having a tremendous impact, and that will only continue and pick up. And so with that, I want to encourage everyone in the room and all our communities that are represented here, we're all indigenous to this planet, and we need to get back to those kind of values that are reflected in things such as a participatory grant making, because that is the way forward. It's truly the only way forward. There is no other way. And in doing so, we'll come back into alignment with ourselves and within our communities and with each other, and we'll be able to come back into balance here in our communities and with the earth and with each other. So I wanted to say that much at least. And one very important thing for Red Eagle Soaring that's happening, it's kind of ironic that we're the native, indigenous youth theater. And in 32 years, we've never had a home of our own in a city full of wealth, in a city full of some big theatrical institutions here. United Way, again, through the Racial Equity Coalition and our United Way of King County funding, has given us the stability that we've needed to grow our capacity, to be able to hire more staff members, which I'm proud to say the 3 staff members I have are alumni of our organization and started out as youth in our organization, and now they're young professionals that are continuing to expand their leadership skills and also their service to our community. But in the last 3-4 years, the Cultural Space Agency invited us to be a part of a project called Station Space Project at King Street Station, which, if you don't know, is to go. I accidentally muted myself for a minute. But to build communities of wealth and rebuild wealth within our, specifically our BIPOC communities, and also a proposition to safe arts and cultural space here in our area by centering our communities. And so at Station Space, we're honored to work with the Cultural Space Agency, also with Totem Star, which is a BIPOC serving organization that works with youth in music, the Rhapsody Project, which through anti-racist lens teaches culture and cultural heritage through music. Some really powerful work that we have, and we have really close relationships with those programs. And so construction is currently underway at the King Street Station on the 2nd floor in what's called Station Space. And don't put this in print yet, but construction schedules can change. But in October, we're planning on the grand opening of the state-of-the-art recording studios, also a black box style theater space that is going to be Red Eagle Soarings that we'll have site control over. That is going to be our space, our creative home, and also classroom, workshop, and conference space for our organizations, including Red Eagle Soaring. And that is also creating like a new model and a new way that nonprofit organizations can collaborate and come together to support all the youth of our community. And we've got some really exciting stuff planned that's really going to support not just our Native youth, but also all the youth that are going to come. And so with that, we're really excited about it. I really want to thank Joe Burris for the blog that you put together. So thank you, Joe. If you haven't had a chance to read that, we've got it posted on our social media, and it's also on the United Way site too. But anyway, we're really excited to invite everybody October-ish for a big grand opening of Station Space right here in the heart of Seattle. That's going to center all of our BIPOC youth and also generations of youth yet to come. We're actually, one more thing, we're negotiating like a 30-year lease with the city with a 60-year option. So we're thinking very long range. But what's really given us the foundation for that is, again, United Way of King County, your continued investment and belief in us and what we do and the impact that it's making. Red Eagle Soaring changes the lives of our youth, and we're so appreciative and so thankful for those that invest in the work, and that has a big ripple effect through our communities. So thank you, though.
Thank you, Russell. Really appreciate hearing some perspective and some wisdom from Dr. Ide and Haley and Russell. I've got a few questions, and then we'll have an opportunity for all of you to bring your questions forward. Russell and all three of you talked about the importance of relationships. So Ide, how does participatory grant making affect the donor organization relationships on a short-term and maybe a long-term basis?
I feel that I want to touch back onto what you shared, Russell, around right relation and reciprocal relations also. That really allows to have and begin that relationship of trust and understanding. And although the power dynamics of being a funder will continue to stay there, right? Because then it will be in the room and it's important to acknowledge it. It is also important to know that I feel like as a person who holds part of the budget, I have a responsibility to do that redistribution of funds. And like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to move the voices of folks to be able to bring forward? So I feel like there is short-term, that beginning of shifting the relationship, and long-term is really practicing indigenous ways of being, right? Like, how are we in right relationship with each other? How are we supporting the collective vision that we want to see? How are we moving to racial equity together? And solidarity and intersectionality, so like it allows for that vision and that larger work of justice that we're looking to have.
Thank you. Yeah, that's powerful. Haley, you talked about having an idea, working on it, getting feedback from the community, which necessitated you pivot and make an adjustment. We're curious, what kind of response have you received from the schools regarding the school community partnership?
I think that's a really big and important question. And I think there's a general understanding that this is the right way to move. Innovating in this way is what's needed. And there's a general, we don't know how and we don't have capacity. And so I think we, like our mental health RFP, for example, we got almost 50 responses to that. And for this school one, we got closer to 20. And I think that was largely due to school districts really need to be ready to dedicate the planning time and collaboration time to work like this. And so we knew it would be a unique school district that was probably already on the pathway already to doing that. And that's, I think my initial hope was that we could help build up new forming relationships, but the reality was the strongest applicants were already on that pathway. And so I've actually pondered, how could we take a step back and help build that first stage of relationship building and get school districts a little bit more ready for that? I think there's some real need for food justice training, and I think understanding the things that I learned throughout the process. Like I think there could be more capacity with more education in some of these spaces, and so welcome ideas if anyone has them. Welcome talking about that.
Great, thanks for sharing. Russell, a question for you in terms of you took us through a bit of Red Eagle Soaring's origin and its growth and where we are now and where we're headed, which is really exciting. But when you think about participatory grant making, multi-year commitments, a partnership, community-led, what kind of adjustments do you think organizations need to make to really benefit from a shift in philanthropy, a shift in funding into a participatory grant making? Are there things that the organizations need to do to be more adept or successful with those kind of relationships?
I think it's super important that what resonates with people are stories, and we're all a collection of our stories, and it's so important that we create spaces to tell those stories. And that's a very reciprocal process as far as like like for our organizations to be able to be very inclusive of funders or people who want to find ways to support our organizations, to be able to invite them in, be able to see the impact of our programming, to see our youth in action, also to be able to hear their testimonials and their voices, because that's what we're centering here. It's also important for funders or grantors to be to not be standoffish, but also to ask the questions of how can we help you, to be also willing to come to us on a community level and be able to just experience, to be able to watch, to be able to observe, to be able to ask questions, to be able to listen. I think making those kind of shifts within the participatory grant making work is what is going to drive that and what is going to transform it over time and be the most impactful. The more that we can, get together in those spaces and be able to share, ask questions, and tell our stories together. So,
Great. Want to make sure we give the audience opportunity to ask questions of this very informed and wise panel. So are there questions from the audience? I have more, but great. And we have a microphone, if you're willing. Well, yeah. Or just walk up to the front, please.
Sorry, my leg is asleep. Testing. Hello. Hi. Great. So participatory grant making has been an overarching theme of this. I guess as a white dude who is in a pseudo leadership position, could you speak on like your engagement models? I mean, in terms of like really engaging in these communities, like what does participatory really mean on like a field level? Like in terms of like implementing these practices, like how, like when I leave here today and I go back to my organization, how do I become participatory?
Can you tell us more about your pseudo leadership?
Yeah. So I work for Salvation Army Northwest Divisional Headquarters, and I'm a compliance specialist. And so I do a variety of tasks due to capacity. I have to wear a lot of different hats, from budgeting exercises, investing in staff, empowering staff, doing training programs, largely for emergency shelter programs. I would say my niche is largely homeless service programming. And so in terms of, we are incredibly blessed to finally be getting traction on what is a new DEI program, which, self-plug, I've been incredibly vocal about. But yeah, so we have a chair coming in, and a lot of it has to do with like a lot of what you've been talking about is community like engagement, and so we have advisory boards for our 28 regional offices, and how do we bring in community partners? That's not the Microsoft guy, that's not the Boeing guy. You know what I mean? Like how do we bring in these community leaders? How do we find these community leaders? Because Christianity in and of itself is a Western institution, and I recognize how white that is. So sincerely, like just like how do we become more participatory?
Great. Great question. Thank you.
I can start and you can add. That sounds about nonprofit institution, and like with all of the things that you're doing. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunities that you have, and that we all have in all of the institutions and the places that we live. So participatory ways of being really are entrenched in the values of communities of color, right? And also it is a theory of popular education, right? So Paulo Freire, like I think starting with Paulo Freire is like a really good place to begin with, like getting to participatory theory. Participatory action research is like a big arm into how we bring in the voices of the folks who are at the center into the work, right? And so I think like one of the important parts is the being ready for accountability, and I think that's something that you mentioned. Like if you want honest and accountable relationship, right, you have to be ready to take into the step of having reciprocal relationships, because usually, especially larger organizations, tend to be really extractive, unintentionally a lot of the times, and get to have that. So I'll say about, in United Ways and larger institutions, so there was a lot of conversations that we had inside. Now, I can tell the story, and talk about that, but there was a lot of figuring out how accounting works to be able to do this, right? How our team has capacity to be able to do this work. So there's a lot of other pieces that are kind of like in the internal part of the work and the rappelling, and also being ready to bring folks along when we are ready and have done kind of like that work that you all are doing, right? Like doing our own work inside of the organization to be able to then begin those relationships. And I'll say, as long as those begin in a reciprocal fashion, that is like a really important part of the work, being able to not extract, especially from communities of color, but to offer, especially as large organizations. I have more to say, but that's some that I'll start saying in terms of how participatory work begins.
I think the willingness to learn, coupled with flexibility. I know a lot of times, I think the rigidity sometimes that. And that's what we're addressing here, is the rigidity sometimes of grantor-grantee relationships, and what grantors expect or what they want, those type of things. It's really in being aware of particular power dynamics as well. I think just continuing to work on that awareness and listening and becoming more open and flexible open to suggestions, open to feedback that you're given, even if it's something that you don't really think you want to hear. That right there is what can create foundations of trust to move forward and move forward together in a way that I think that that transformation will happen. And I also think, too, that the grantors or people in those positions, once they see the impact of that work and they see, they're able to see it in real life and in real time, that can be really transformational for people internally, too, that typically always saw things a certain way. And then to be able to see things from another perspective is like saying a miracle is simply a shift in perception. So as soon as those shifts in perception happen, then that's where we can get to new places together. So
I can add a few closing comments. I think be there for the long haul, right? Trust does not happen overnight. And had I been having these focus groups to then never reach back out to community, to never then bring them back to the table of here's what we've done and would you like to apply? I think take the long haul approach in building relationships and recognize that recognize the power dynamics of your privilege at that table to be able to kind of set that stage, and the courage that it's taking to be in that space for many people. I think about power dynamics in everything. So how you set the agenda, what are the power dynamics of this? Who's sending the invite? Who is speaking? Right? I think there's just so many ways to always be thinking about shifting power. Compensating community, really important for their time. We compensated for the focus groups, and there's so many best practices, but I think just as a white person, doing your research, understanding the history, do your homework. Also understand where community's voice has already been given, understand the reports that are already out there, the data collection that's been done already, and don't re-ask things that have been asked, right? And yeah, I guess the biggest thing though is just recognize the long process of trust in relationships, and the authentic nature that can have. And I think it's tricky as a funder sometimes because I am a funder. I'm seen as a funder in rooms, and sometimes I just want to build relationship and not talk about funding. So there's just, yeah, it's a shift for all involved, but yeah.
Yes, one more question, please. Come on up, please.
I'm limping.
That's okay. We're with you.
So this question is more for Gordon, but also for the three of you. So we talk about global when we are talking. And I want to bring a vision. When we see people from other countries coming to the United States, for example, for work, it means that where they are, there aren't opportunities. And yet people like ourselves who are actually registered non-for-profits here in the United States, in Washington State, don't usually get the opportunity to be on the table because we are working overseas. And yet, the work that we are doing is what is stopping those people we see and read about sinking in ships, because we are creating opportunities for them where they are so they don't leave their countries. So the global really means global because we are creating those jobs internationally, and we are living here and registered here. So in that participatory, most times, almost 99.9%, you don't have opportunities for organizations such as ourselves to be included in the grant making for organizations that give grants to organizations that work overseas, even though we are registered here. So my question to you in that participatory and in the grant making is, we really are the global that is making the globe really be what it is, that is inclusive. And yet we are excluded from the very beginning. What I'm asking of yourselves and the international granting organizations and those who employ people from here to go and work overseas and leave organizations such as these ones who are already doing the work and not partnering with them is, what suggestions do you have? And if you don't have any suggestions right now, it's something worth really thinking about. So Gordon?
How much time do I have to think?
I'll give you my business card.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One part. Thank you for asking, and I just appreciate that. I'm listening to your question, and I am reflecting on the place that we're in right here. And Russell talked about the stories that exist in communities that have a focus on serving specific communities or peoples. And so I think your question is powerful, and it's one I'm going to take seriously, and we'll find, Regina and I will find time to talk with you. One example that may not be a direct answer is we got to know an organization here that's centered in Puget Sound, King County and Pierce County. Their peoples live here. Some are newer immigrants and refugees, and we got to know them through the COVID work. And then there was a disaster, a natural disaster that affected their community, but thousands of miles away. And so we reached out to them and said, we don't fund that work in that island nation, but we know that your community is connected very much to the people who are suffering because of this disaster. How can we be of help? And so that wasn't a promise of money, although some money did flow from United Way. Some money flowed from individuals associated with United Way because we were moved by the story. But the key thing for United Way is, because we were already doing participatory grant making, we said, we'll give you some money, and we trust that you will use it as you best see fit. And whether that is working with people who are currently living in King and Pierce County, or that's them sending money home to their aunties, their uncles, their grandparents, their nieces and nephews. It doesn't matter to us because you're hurting and you're asking for help. So it wasn't a lot of money, but they later wrote back to me, and a couple of folks said, we appreciate that you are aware of us, you saw us, and you asked, could you be of help? And I said, no problem. And I said, what next? I said, just come visit with us. Just come next time. We're doing some rebuilding. We'd love for United Way to just come be a part of our community as we practice our cultural ways of surviving a crisis. And so that's not a direct answer to you, but when you do participatory grant making, we have the flexibility to put that money to best use, to the use as that community best sees fit, because it wasn't tied to a funding cycle. It wasn't tied to an RFP. It wasn't tied to 1 year. It was tied to a relationship. And we're still in a relationship with that community. And I think all of us who are funders can be thinking about that. I think that, we talk about culture and about people's, race, ethnicity, culture, and we talk about place. But as Russell said, with the exception of the indigenous folks who were here for thousands of years, the rest of us have a place that also is part of our ancestry and part of our connection, our cultural connections. And we should honor that. If that's important to the organization, then it should be important to United Way and other funders. But I will think about how that we can we operation, I hate to say operation, but can we live into that more while still being true to our primary purpose of immediate needs that are here in the King County region. But I appreciate the challenge. I don't know if other folks have reaction other than to say, yes, we need to think and learn. Yes, ma'am. Well, and this will be our last ones because I'm mindful of people's time, and so I don't want
Is
to.
it okay if I turn my back to you because there's
doesn't-
more people over there?
Absolutely.
I was just sitting there thinking about everyone in this room and how we're all human. And yet we create these very complex systems with formalities and technical writing and technically speaking when we are talking to the people that deliver the direct service. And that's where we lose the trust because we forget that we're all connected. And if it wasn't for the people who receive the direct service, none of us would have a job. And so it's so simple that it's so complicated, that it's really complicated for those at the top. Treat us like we're people. Write contracts like you're talking to human beings. You will reduce your burnout, the burnout of the people who do the direct service, the burnout of the people who supervise the direct service providers. It will help all of us. And then you won't have to worry about trust, and you won't have to worry about all these technical words for participatory engagement. Let's not forget that we're all in the same world. We all come from the same beginnings, and it's that simple. Thank you.
I just thank you for that. I wanted to add one more thing onto what Gordon had said, and talking about the power of culture and how we need to get back to being people of culture. And within that is embedded in our values, and those are global. It can be local, but at a global level with that. And so with that, I just wanted to express that because when you form those type of that's what transcends a lot of other things, and I love what you had to say about that. It's based on a relationship, and I think the more that we continue to come together and form those relationships together, that's the path forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's thank the panelists. For the work they do, for sharing your experiences, and I think sharing your wisdom. I appreciate it. All of you for coming. Appreciate this. We have these advancing racial equity conversations. I hope you'll keep track, and then we'll be having more. We also work in partnership, seek to be in partnership. We seek to support and serve. We're also a fundraiser, and so if this is meaningful to you, and you would like to join and support our work, you can make a donation. We're not going to pass anything around now. The doors are going to stay open. Don't have to worry about that. But if you'd like to support United Way, it's just go online. Like any nonprofit, there's a donate button, and we appreciate it. It's about, relationships, about this community that we all share. So what's really important to me is not just the money, it's the curiosity, it's the support and a challenge to think even broader than we currently are. And it's spreading the information about this work, about United Way. And so that would be my ask of you also, is just if this is meaningful and helpful, let somebody else know about it and encourage them to be curious, perhaps to join us, and to support great people like this and great organizations like the Wing Luke Museum and all those organizations and communities that we've been talking about tonight. Have a great evening, a great summer, and let's get back together again sometime soon. Thank you very much.